Gary did his morning walk. Nice and sunny. Much better than here. Yeah, maybe. I think it's been raining for a little while here. Before we get started, does everyone have ARCHICAD open? Just a blank new document. When you are using the new, just try to use the work environment profile, try to use the standard profile. So therefore, things that I'm doing on my screen hopefully will be the same. But if not, it's no problem. Do you think a lot of you guys will be using Curtainwall tool? Do you think this is your projects use curtain walls very often? So even though this Curtainwall tool is obviously for curtain walls, you can actually use it to make like tiles or ceiling panels, things like this. So any kind of grid type element. So it's kind of quite versatile. So yeah, even if you don't have curtain walls in your project, you may be able to use this for other types of things. Yeah, give it another minute. Also, I see Azay is also recording this as well. Okay, I'm going to go through the tool just to try to understand what the element, how it's set up first, and then we'll just start playing with just some of the options. Somebody, it says this session is being recorded, so somebody is. Okay, maybe I recorded as well. Okay, so everyone has ARCHICAD open, I'm guessing. So let's get started. We're going to use this tool, so this Curtainwall, so this icon in the toolbox. And we're just going to double click because we're going to go through these settings, and I'll try to explain just some of the how it's set up. So this is what we call a hierarchical tool, meaning it's made up of lots of components within kind of a system. It's a little bit similar to railing or stair, and now in 23 a little bit with the column and beam. So made up of subparts into a system. So because it's hierarchical, there's a lot of different components. So maybe it gets a little bit more complex. Yep, so all we've done is just opened up the Curtainwall tool, and we're just checking the default settings currently. So if we select the Curtainwall system, these are general settings for the entire system. So at the top, we can set the height, offset from ground, home story. So this is very similar to any other tool. Nominal thickness, we don't have to generally worry about this too much. The thicknesses are really defined by the frame depth. So this is used in case there is other elements that are connecting into this curtain wall, and therefore this will play a factor in that. but for this morning, we don't have to worry about this one. Tilt angle, the height of the reference line, because I'm on default, I can't set this. And also the distance from the reference line on floor plan to the center. Choose how you want to denote where the reference line is to the components. So we'll keep these as standard. Next, we'll go through the floor plan and section panel. So here again, we have the show on stories, quite similar to other tools. Floor plan display, again, similar to other tools, but this projection mode is quite unique. So this is used for the new beam as well as the curtain wall. So if you're using anything quite a few versions ago, so curtain wall got quite a big upgrade, I think in 21, 22. So if you're using, say, version 20, then this will actually look quite different. So the projection mode, if I open this up, so this projection mode I just open up, here we can actually tell which parts, so the overhead, cut or uncut components, whether each of them are symbolic or projected. For example, if you have a tilted curtain wall and you want what you see below to be projected, then that's good. But possibly what you want to see above you, you only want to see the lines and not the full frames. So at the overhead, you would choose symbolic. So you need to mix and match basically which parts you want to see projected, like real or symbolic. For the cut elements, we have a hybrid mode where we project and show the real shape of the frames rather than just a symbolic view, but the panels we show as symbolic. So it's a hybrid if the frames showing projected and the panel showing symbolic. So that allows us to show the symbol of the door. Because if this door was projected, you probably don't want to show that. So generally doors and windows are always shown as symbolic. So it shows the door swing, things like this. So we'll keep these as the default settings. I won't go through the other things. These are fairly standard from other tools as well. Under the member placement panel, then we have junctions. If we go all at once, then this will, once I place it, it will create these spider joints at every single junction, but we don't want that, so we'll just use the one by one. And also we can choose where the boundary frame, how that's being sat on the edge of the edge of the curtain wall. So if this curtain wall is going inside, for example, an existing opening, then you'd probably want to put the boundary frames on the inside. Okay. So for now, we'll just keep it on center. Okay, so let's go to scheme, and we'll go through each of these options kind of individually, and we'll play with how they actually behave. But I'll try to explain them first, and then we'll put it in practice. So we're now on the schemes panel, and we have columns and rows. So you can choose as many as you want. So you can add and remove columns, add and remove rows, set the width and height of each of these rows and columns to create a grid grid layout. Below the columns and below the rows, so basically the same type of settings. So we have either fixed size, best division, or number of divisions. So fixed size meaning it'll be exactly 900, 300, and then it'll repeat 900, 300, 900, 300. So we'll keep repeating this pattern for as long as I draw my curtain wall. And if my curtain wall length is not divisible by this, then it will just place in a little bit of the pattern. So this is why we have this bottom setting here. So maybe I can show this one. So how do you want to fill in that area where the pattern doesn't actually fit? So we can choose partial pattern, and we can choose a few different options, but we'll keep this. We'll keep this as a partial pattern. If we choose best division, so best division will evenly distribute these and flex one of them. So here we can see a little lock. So the one that's unlocked will be flexible, meaning that this will take up the slack basically of our curtain wall, and it will fit exactly the so it may be, instead of 900, it might be 910 or something to fit this, so it doesn't have any leftover space. But I'll maybe put this into practice so it's a little bit easier to understand. And the number of divisions is how many patterns do you want over the length of the curtain wall. Here we have which panel, which column do we want to end on. So if we go an A, B, A, B, then at the end, do we want to stop at B or we want to stop at A? So let's keep this at fixed size, and we'll keep this at B and this one at 3, so as the default. And we'll leave everything else as default, and we'll just start playing with these 3 different options. And then I'll go through the pattern because this is also editable. But for now, we'll just play with the fixed size, best division, and number of divisions logic. Yep. So now we'll keep it at fixed size. So just keep it at the default. And we're going to hit OK. And try to zoom in a little bit. And then when we start drawing, so we're using the geometry method of just the single. And along my x-axis, I'm just going to start drawing. So as I start moving my cursor, I actually see where the pattern is meant to be. So where is the next pattern going to finish? And because I see that preview, I can actually snap to that preview. So I can actually snap exactly to the correct sizes. But if I just choose a random size that doesn't snap, then it's going to cut off the pattern. Okay. So I'm just going to click where I didn't snap on the end, so I just put part of a pattern at the end. So I'm going to hit F5 just to see this in 3D. Okay, so here I can see the pattern is AB, so it's just continuing, and then it just puts a part of a pattern wherever I stopped the curtain wall length. But it starts from the left side where I first clicked. Okay, so yeah, we're just using the default settings. So could everyone get a simple curtain wall? We'll do the next ones in 3D, and we'll also see the ghost of kind of where the pattern is going to be as well. Okay, yes, great. Okay, so we've done this as the fixed size. So let's open up the settings again, and columns, we're going to choose best division. Yeah, so we'll just double click and make sure that this is the default. So we're not changing the curtain wall, we're just changing the default now. So make sure you don't select that curtain wall. Yeah, so with nothing selected, we double click the curtain wall tool and change columns to best division, and we'll stick with B at the end. And by default, it will unlock the first column, so the 900, so we'll keep this. I could unlock both, but at least one has to be unlocked. Okay, so we'll just keep that default. So all we changed is best division. And then I'm going to click OK. I'm going to do one click, and along my x-axis, when I start moving, you'll see that the pattern is always fitting in the length of my curtain wall. And as I move, then this panel that was unlocked will flex. So sometimes if I go small, then it's only one pattern. If I go a little bit bigger, now it's 2 patterns that are being repeated. And then we'll click. And so now we have this pattern evenly distributed, and the A column is flexing to always fit that length. Okay, so let me know how you go with this one, the best division method. Yes, okay. So let's now go into the default settings again, and we're going to now choose number of divisions. And we're going to choose 2 So basically it's going to repeat this AB twice. And the flexible one again is the column A because it's unlocked. Okay, so number of divisions 2, I'm going to hit OK. And now you can see as I move my cursor, it's always going to fit 2 patterns, regardless of how long this curtain wall will be. So this can actually be quite handy in case you need like just 10 divisions. Then you can just put divisions 10 and only have 1 column, for example. So we'll evenly distribute that 1 column over 10. Okay, so how did you go with the number of divisions? Great. Okay, so we're going to switch back to best division. Now in the default settings, so I've opened up the curtain wall again, default settings, and changed the column to back to best division. And this time I'm going to change my ending. So instead of B, I'm going to choose A. So I've just changed it back to best division and changed the last panel to be an A rather than a B. So we just change those 2 settings. Then we're going to hit OK, and then we're going to draw another. So now when I stretch this and just click, then it goes A, B, A, B, A, B, and then A. So it's more symmetrical in this case. Can't get number of dev. Not sure what you mean, because do you not see number of divisions in this pop-up? So schemes, number of divisions. So this is what we just did before. And then this new one, we did the just best division and we stopped with an A. Okay, got it. Great. Okay, so let's go back into, so now we've done the best division, but we've ended with the same one that we started with, so it ends in A. So I think this can be quite useful as well, so you get a more symmetrical appearance of the curtain wall. Okay, so now we're going to open up the settings again. Again, we're in the default. And we won't go through the rows because this is the same method as the columns. So it's basically the same, just that it's vertical versus horizontal. And below, the only thing with rows is we have an extra angle. We can actually set the angle between the column and the row. So normally it would be 90 degrees, but you can change that. So for example, it could be more of a diamond shape or something. But generally you would always want your rows to be horizontal, I think. Okay, so let's have a look at this preview now. So we had a look at just this columns and rows, but let's have a look at this preview. This preview is clickable, and I can hold Shift to select multiple components. And when I select a component, it will highlight the row and the column that panel, for example, is. And at the bottom, it will also indicate what class or what type this panel or frame is using. So if I select one panel, then it says at the bottom it's a main panel. We'll go through that in a little bit, but I can change this to say there's no panel or it's a distinct panel. So this just means if it's, for example, in mine, there's a glass one and an aluminium one. So main is glass and the distinct is the aluminium. Yeah. So we can just select the components and then modify what class or what type it's using. If I select the frame, then it's the same. So I can say what type of frame type that this frame is using. Instead of holding Shift to multi-select these elements, I can just select one, and in the bottom right-hand corner here, I can select the whole row and then everything across. So this is just a handy little selection. These ones. So they're just for selection. Okay, so if I select a panel, then I get two other icons appearing here. Yeah, so I can basically add a crossing frame, so I can divide it diagonally. You can only create one diagonal, so you can't do a crisscross. So only one diagonal. But if I click, for example, add crossing frame, then now this divides it into two. So if I try the other crossing, it's actually going to just change that crossing into the other type. So just to quickly show you why this might be useful, if I open up the favorites pop-up up here, then here are just some, I won't click on any, but I'll just show you the favorites that are out of the box. So here we can actually make some like diamond shapes, and we can actually do hexagonal honeycomb type arrangements. So with this diagonal. Okay. So I'm going to remove this diagonal. So I'm just going to click on the frame in the center of that diagonal and change the type to none merge panels. That will remove it. Okay, so if I select one of these frames, I can use that same technique that I just got rid of that one diagonal frame. So if I select, say, this vertical frame, I can actually change not just the type to be a different type, but I can also choose a division, which just means it's a line in 3D. So it's just purely just dividing two panels, or I can say none, and this will actually create one panel. So it'll actually merge these two panels into one. So this becomes just a grid line. So this again is how we can get these shapes like honeycomb to appear. So by using this, why I don't have this option. Which version are you using? So a lot of these versions features only came in ARCHICAD 22, I think. So if you're using an older version, then it has much less functionality. So it really depends on which version you're using. That's not the question. Okay, so asked to repeat. I haven't really done anything. I don't know which to repeat because I've said a lot. So all I did was select one of these frames and change the type down here to none. So that will merge these two panels into one. How to undo the slanting. So if you have a diagonal, select the frame in the diagonal and change that to none, and that will remove it. Yeah, so if you have a diagonal, actually, unfortunately, I can't, delete won't work. So I have to change it to none. Yeah, I think delete can work, but yeah, my focus was in a different location. So I think, yeah, delete does work. Just my focus of my cursor was in a different field. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, delete will work. So if you hit delete, then it will automatically go to none merge panels. Yeah. Okay, and then the last part down the bottom here is a pattern origin. So this allows you to move the pattern. So it's not always the bottom left, but it can move either vertically or horizontally. Because we've now set this to best division, then the pattern origin doesn't really make sense anymore because it's always distributing equally across the length. But I can still offset on the inside or from the bottom. Yeah. So if you do want to start this curtain wall, say 500 mil in from the boundary, then you can set these down here. We'll go through these a little bit later when we do a different example, but for now we'll just use this. So for now we'll just keep it as it is, and I'm going to hit OK, and I'm just going to draw a curtain wall with 2 clicks. And so now I can see a larger panel here. Okay, so let's go back into the settings, and I'll just go through the other components, and then we'll start actually messing around with the geometry. So it's good to understand how this is kind of set up first. Okay, so we're back into the curtain wall default settings. So for the default wall, curtain wall, and now we're going to choose frames. Yeah, so we'll switch to frames. And here I can see 4 frames. The corner frame, this is fixed in ARCHICAD, so we can't delete this one, and the boundary is also fixed. You don't see these 2 types inside the scheme because the boundary will go around the entire curtain wall, and a corner frame, in case it's a polygon, a polyline shaped curtain wall, then this will be used. So if it's a polyline, then the ends will be, the corners will be this corner frame type automatically. And then we have our custom ones, which are the mullion and the transom. We can remove these and we can add our own. If I select one, then it will highlight in green the selection in the preview. You can see that they show. Yeah. So I won't go and add and remove. It's fairly self-explanatory, I think. So if you add, then you create a new type. And if you remove, then you will have to tell ARCHICAD what do you want to replace so those that those frames that are using this mullion type, what do you want to replace those with? So how do you want to convert those frames? So it's similar to the delete and replace functionality in other parts of ARCHICAD. Okay. So with this mullion frame, I might actually rename this. So how can we rename it? If we just do a second click, then we'll go into an editing field. Yep. So just a second click will allow you to edit the name. So for the mullion frame, to make it a little bit clearer, I'm going to call these vertical frame, and the transom I'm just going to call horizontal frame. Yeah. Just so it's a little bit clearer for me. Yeah, so there's a horizontal. So to edit, just a second click in the name to edit the name. Okay. So the column, the second column, this is just the type. So the type of frame that you want to use, which is the same as this pop-up under the type and geometry panel as well. So it's just the same, just here it's in line and here it's a little bit more detailed. How to omit the mullion. We're not, oh, I think that was, yeah, sorry, that was from quite a few minutes ago. Okay. So here we can set any of these frame types to be what type of type. So invisible, meaning that there's no frame, but we can leave a gap. And either we can have more complex ones. Some of these will indicate more corner. So I'd probably only use those for the corner frame type rather than for your general frames. Yeah. So all these that with the little corner kind of in the image, I would only use those for the corner frame. Those icons with a little eye appearing on it, then this means that this type can use a profile. So like what we did earlier this week to create profiles, then we can actually apply those profiles that we draw to these curtain wall frame types. But for now, we'll just leave this. We can set the sizes here. So all of the sizes for the frame. We can also set how do we want to preview. So just, this is similar to the object library as well. And we have this frame intersection priority. So this will determine basically when frames are joining, which one wins. So which one is stronger at these junctions. So this is why we need the frame intersection priority. So the higher the number, then the more it's going to win over weaker numbers. If we go into the curtain wall frame settings, so depending on which frame type we've used, then this will show all of the settings for that frame type. But we'll just keep the defaults. Now, we'll go into a little bit more detail, I think, with panels a bit later, but here we can set all the settings. One handy thing, so once I've set up one frame type, and I really like that frame type, and I want to reuse that, I can either create a favorite, but if I just want to transfer this frame type, for example, into another frame type inside the same curtain wall, so I want to kind of copy the settings, or I want to use this frame type in a second curtain wall. So if I didn't have them all selected, then what I can do is actually right click and copy the settings from that frame type. Yeah, so if I say copy, I can go to any other frame type and I can paste. So this is a handy little feature just to be able to copy and paste the settings from one frame type to another, either within the same dialog or between curtain walls. So what I'm going to do is copy the vertical frame. So copy vertical frame, and into my horizontal frames, I'm going to go paste. So paste vertical frame to selection. Yeah, so now these will actually appear exactly the same. And you can see that the intersections are showing, but I actually want these horizontal frames to be a weaker, because I don't want them to join like kind of this mitered kind of appearance. So for the horizontal frame, I'm just going to drag the intersection priority less than 8. Yeah, so now you can see in the preview that the vertical ones are stronger now than the horizontal because they have intersection 8 and the horizontal are now 7. So this is how we can determine which frame wins. Okay, let's go to panels. So panels, pretty similar to how the frames are set up. So here in the panel section, we don't have any predefined types or classes. So in frames, we have 2 fixed ones, the corner and the boundary, but for the panels, we don't have that. So all of them are customizable. The main panel and distinct panel, and again, I can just do a second click to edit the name. And for the main panel, I'm just going to call this glass panel. And for the distinct panel, I'm going to do a second click and call this Aluminium panel. Just so it's a little bit clearer about what the types are. This is very similar. So we have a pop-up to indicate what kind of panel type we want to use. And we can create as many as we want. We'll do more later. And here we can see that we have, so in this pop-up for panels, we can see some different shapes. So we see, for example, rectangular ones, hexagonal ones. The hexagonal ones purely mean that this panel type will always fit the shape. And I'll go through that a little bit later when we start customizing this, but it will fit any shape, but the rectangular ones will always fit only rectangular shapes. So I'll show you how that kind of works. We we have doors, we have windows, louvers. We even have this custom one, and we'll create a custom one a bit later. So how to create a GDL object that we can use inside this curtain wall. And again, the ones with the eye means that we can actually apply profiles to these. So this is so the icons are very useful to understand how to use these. Okay, so we're going to keep these all as default. We'll go on to junctions. I don't think we'll use junctions today, but these are spider connections that are between these grid lines. So if it's on an end, for example, then it will only have 2. If it's at the top, then I think it only has, say, 1. So this will change depending on where it is in the curtain wall. But for now, we won't use these. Either we can use that setting that I showed in the system, where you can place them all at once, or you can actually manually place these after. So after you've created your curtain wall, you can actually draw in the junctions later. And the same for accessories. So the accessories you can only add in later, drawing on top of the curtain wall that you place. So an accessory is things like, these 3 things. So sunshade, caps, anchor, or you can create your own. So these things that kind of get applied on top of the curtain wall, but we won't use these today. Won't use these this morning. Okay, so let's just keep everything like what we did and hit OK. And I'm going to draw just the same one, and we'll use this one to edit with. I'm just going to draw a curtain wall with those settings. It looks like pretty much the same as what we did, but we just changed some of the names. Okay, so is everyone still with me? It's been a few minutes since anyone said anything. Yes, okay, thanks, Gary. Okay, thanks. Okay, so now that we've drawn a new curtain wall, we're going to just select the arrow tool. We're going to select this curtain wall, and we see this little edit button appear. So whenever it's a hierarchical tool, as I mentioned earlier, then you're going to be able to see this edit button. So the edit button will usually be kind of bottom right of the center of the element. So this edit button allows us to start editing and selecting these subcomponents, because currently all I've done is select the whole curtain wall, but with edit, we can actually go into an edit mode to edit this individual components. But before I do that, so if you did that already, just hit escape. Yep, so before I do that, just a few things about the overall curtain wall. So we can see a blue line, which is very similar to the wall and the other elements. So this is its reference line. So this is where it's being built from. We can click on that blue reference line. So when the cursor shows Mercedes, and we can actually edit this line. So very similar to how we would edit a wall. So we can add a node. When we add a node, it doesn't just split it, it actually keeps one curtain wall, and this node will then use the corner frame type. So we just clicked on the reference line, and I'm just going to choose the first option from the pet palette. So the insert node, and I'm just going to drag that somewhere to the center to kind of create an L-shaped. And now it's created a single curtain wall, but with 2 segments. Unfortunately, when you click on the end, you can't continue the polyline, so you can't add another segment from an end. You would have to move that point and then add a point to kind of continue it. We don't have that to continue. So it's always worth getting your curtain wall to the exact endpoints and then adding points in the center or drawing it as a polyline. How to select the point again? Yep. So when the curtain wall is selected, hover over the blue line. So when your cursor shows a bold Mercedes symbol, click, and you'll get the pet palette. So what we did was do an insert node to then create a polyline versus a single line. Okay, so I actually want to undo that. So I'm going to take it back to just a single segment of a wall, curtain wall, and I'm going to click on this blue reference line again. So all I did was just undo. And then we can actually curve this curtain wall as well. So if I curve it, then we can actually curve, but all of the segments and all of the panels will still be straight. So we don't have curved frames and panels, but it will segment along that arc. So if we curve it, then you can see that it's segmented around. So you can see here, because this panel was merged, but because there's a grid line, then it will actually break along this grid line if we curve. So I think the curving is maybe not the most common. So obviously, if you have smaller column widths, then the curve will look smoother. The bigger they are, then the more segmented it will look. So I'm going to undo that again. So could you add a point, undo that, and then curve it, and then undo that? So just let me know if you could do this. Similar to a wall, we can grab the nodes on the top of it and stretch the height, things like this, and we can angle it. No problem. Okay. One benefit of the curtain wall is that the curtain wall can actually be rotated in any XYZ coordinate. So it doesn't always have to be drawn as a line with an extrusion up. We can start curving it, rotating it. So let's try this. Let's try just rotating it on with this axis. So what we're going to do is select just this single curtain wall. We're going to use Control E. So Control E opens up the rotation command. So I'll just write this in. So Control plus E equals rotate. So we go E, Control E, then this brings up the compass. And we're going to click on the curtain wall, so on one of the, somewhere in the middle. So I'm going to click on it and then hover my cursor along the x-axis. So when I snap to the x-axis, I'm going to click. I'm just going to drag my mouse up to around, and I'm going to enter 45 degrees. So I just type 45 and enter. So now we can rotate this curtain wall 45 degrees. We can in any XYZ, but for now we'll just do it in this plane. So let me know how you go with the rotate, or if you want me to repeat that. Repeat, okay. So I selected my curtain wall, Control E. Okay, some got it, great. Clicking somewhere on the center. So when it shows my compass as being in this vertical plane, so click, hover over the x-axis, click, and then just move my cursor up, type in 45, enter. So then this is now rotated 45 degrees from that point that I clicked. So if with this curtain wall still selected, I'm going to open Control T to open up its properties. And I can still edit everything. So even though it's rotated, it's still the same curtain wall. And if I choose the curtain wall system, then you'll notice that the icon just changes a little bit. So because it's now non-horizontal, then the icon will indicate that this is kind of free rotated now. So the icons just represent now that it's rotated. One button I didn't explain was this little one, this one. So like what we did earlier in the week, we flipped the wall over its axis. The curtain wall has the same flip function. So if you need to flip the geometry to the other side of the reference line, then you can just click this button to flip the geometry. So if you've got the inside outside in the wrong order, then we can just flip it. We can also do this in say section elevation. We can actually draw a curtain wall, and we'll go through some editing functions in the section window a bit later. What I find is handy is maybe we can go through, we can actually say rotate this down to the floor plan, and then it can be, for example, like tiles on the floor or ceiling panels and stuff like that. So because we can rotate it in any direction, then we can use it for pretty much anything, any kind of grid-like structure. Okay, so I'm going to get the curtain wall tool again, and I'm just going to draw another one here that's just horizontal. Yeah, just so we don't undo. So I'm just going to draw another one. And this one we're going to start editing into the edit mode. So I just use the curtain wall and then just drew another 2 points to create a new curtain wall. Yeah, so let me know when you've got a new curtain wall, and then we're going to choose the arrow and then select it, and then click the edit button. So instead of editing just the overall shape, I'm now going to go into the subcomponents. So now that we're in edit mode, we get this little panel up in the top here. And we can see that everything, all the other curtain walls get grayed out, and my editing plane has now become vertical. So it's actually in line now with this curtain wall. So everyone's gone into the edit mode. I can see a number of layers. I've got the scheme grid, frames, panels, so I can actually turn each of these components off. So for example, let's just try turning the panels and the frames off. So to make things a little bit easier for editing, we can just turn on and off these layers. But for now, we'll just keep them on. We'll keep off the pattern because we'll work with this later, and we'll keep off the scheme grid for now. And we can also turn off the environment. So if we don't want the context to be in our way, we can just hit the environment on and off. Sorry, I'm late. Hi, Jessica. How to get into edit mode. Once you've drawn a curtain wall, select it, and then there's a little edit button that will appear. So now I can't actually select anything outside of this curtain wall. So edit mode only allows me to edit what's inside here. If I press escape, then this will exit edit mode. So this is worthwhile keeping in mind. I'm just going back into edit mode. Okay, and now we're going to start playing around with this curtain wall a little bit. So I'm going to select one of these frames. So one of these vertical frames, for example. If I hover, so if I select it and hover over it, you get these same selection icons that we did have in the scheme. So you can actually select the whole row or the whole column. But I just want to select one. And like the scheme, I can just hit delete, and that will remove that frame. So now this panel will be one panel. Yeah, so I just selected one frame and just hit delete. Okay, now I'm selecting this panel. Repeat. I just selected one frame and hit delete. So like to one of the center ones between the glass. Okay, so now that we've got one frame deleted, if we start, so just one note that if you start editing the curtain wall like this, I can't select it. You have to be in edit mode. So are you in edit mode? And with your selection arrow, just make sure that your magnet is on. So the magnet should be pushed. Okay, so once we start editing this, then we actually start making this to custom. So we can only do, it becomes to custom, meaning that if I start modifying the overall scheme, then things are unlikely to affect as much because you're moving this more to a custom kind of layout and less connected to the scheme itself. So my advice would generally be try to keep the scheme intact and only kind of edit these things if you really need to. So try to organize it as much as you can in the scheme rather than customizing it too directly, just because I think having it set in the scheme is more powerful because it's more global. So, but obviously we can set this, it just starts removing, it makes it to more custom, and that's all. Got to know. Okay, so now we'll select one of these panels, and this panel, I'm just going to also hit delete. Yeah. So basically now it's a hole. So now there's no window in there. Yep. So we just deleted a frame, and then we deleted this panel. Okay, so how do we get this panel back? So how do we get a panel back here? Because I'm in edit mode, my whole toolbox is now being modified to show me now the curtain wall tools. So I can actually start drawing and putting panels in. So I'm going to choose the panel tool in the toolbox. So the panel tool. And panels can only fill in space between frames. So now when I just hover over this empty space, and I'm going to click once, then it's going to fill in that area with the panel again. So all I did was delete the panel and then choose the panel tool and then click in the same space to bring the panel back. Okay, so now what we can do actually with the frames. So the frames are actually much more customizable. So we can actually draw frames in any location. Just the frames have to be straight, that's all. So instead of just drawing a frame from kind of top to bottom, I'm actually going to do a frame that kind of cuts across here. So I'm going to go a frame from this top node. So I'm going to move my cursor. So I've chosen now the frame tool. Hover over one of the ends of the existing frame. So when I see a tick mark, I'm going to click. And then if I click somewhere in the center, then this is not so good. So ARCHICAD always likes the frames to connect to other frames. So if I click in kind of empty space, then what it actually does will still split. So it will still create a grid line that extends from this, because we can't have frames that are open-ended like this. So ARCHICAD doesn't like that. So I'm just going to delete that one. So the frame tool, I have to go basically connect frames to frames. So I'll go click on this top one. It can get a little bit tricky just because there's a lot of edges here. So I'm clicking on a node of one frame, and I'm going to move my cursor down until I see my pencil go solid. That means I'm on another end node. So once it turns solid, I click again, and now I've connected a frame from here down to here. Yeah. So I just clicked on a checkpoint. So when my cursor is a tick, I clicked, and then when my pencil turned to solid, sort of solid black, I then clicked again. Whenever frames, so there is an underlying grid here. So if I actually turn on this scheme grid, I can actually see this underlying grid. If my frames cross this grid, then these frames always break or always split. So they'll always split along these grid lines. How to make it a smooth line? I think this is a smooth line. If you wanted vertical, so if I just want to connect the dots, I'm going to undo that one. So I'm going to go from click on one end, and that's a tick. I can always hold shift to constrain to the y-axis, and then move my cursor until it turns into a solid pencil, and then click. So when it's a solid pencil, it means that it's connecting to a node. So I find this can get a little bit tricky because if you don't click in the right spot, then it may make your frame a little bit too short. And then, as I said before, when you have a frame that is sort of open-ended, if you have a frame that's open-ended, then it will still split the frames, the panels. Yeah. So this is how I can get a vertical frame back in. So maybe I want to split this horizontally as well, or maybe I want to go from, say, this point to, say, the center point. I still have my setting on division 3, so I'm going to change that to half. And then when my pencil, so my pencil is now showing with a line through it. Okay, the zooming doesn't help too much. My pencil has a line in it, meaning that the pencil is along an edge. So if the pencil is hollow, that means that I'm not sort of connecting to anything, but when my pencil has a line in it, it means I'm on an edge. And now I'm going to show, yeah, connecting to that center point. So I can get a diagonal along here. I'm going from that center point to solid pencil. So now I can get a K. So I find this a little bit tricky just with the, so really have to pay attention to the cursor, because again, if I don't click in the right spot, then it will start creating kind of smaller segments of frame and splitting the panel anyway. So I find it's harder to maybe edit afterwards. So let me undo all of this. Okay, so if I didn't get the point correctly at the first point, then here I can see that I didn't get my connection point correct. And if I try to just drag that endpoint to the node, so when it gets to a solid pencil, sometimes it can actually cause some fragments of frames, depending on where the frame crossed. So instead of editing, I tend to think that undoing it and try to doing it again is maybe a little bit better. So the cursor is really important with this. Sorry, I was testing something quickly. Okay, so I'm going to choose the frame, and now I'm going to go from this node, hover over my vertical frame till I find the center point. When the cursor turns to a solid pencil, click. Again, to get the center point, just make sure that we select half from this pop-up and choose half. So like what we did earlier in the week. And then I'm going from a tick mark and to a solid pencil here. The frames don't have to always go as a linear line here. So in this space here, I can go from an edge when I get Mercedes, and I can actually just say, for example, do a zigzag through here. So as long as the frames are being connected, then it's okay. It just doesn't like it when it's an open-ended frame. So it's a little bit tricky to get, but see how you go. Yeah, so it's really important to understand the cursor situation. So when I see a Mercedes, it means I'm on an edge. And when I see a tick, it means I'm on a node. If I don't see either of those, then it means that I'm not on an edge or a node. And during editing, then the pencil will show me if there's a line in the pencil, it means I'm on an edge. And if it's a solid pencil, then it's on a node. It's maybe a lot to remember. So just let me know how you go. Can I do curve frames? No, all the frames have to be straight segments. So if you kind of want to fake a curve, you could do multiple segments. Okay, so for me, I'm between my zigzag that I did and my K. I'm actually just going to remove this center frame, and so it kind of is a sideways left hop, maybe, or a ice cream cone with 2 scoops. Any issues so far? So I know it's a little bit can get a little bit tricky. Okay, I'll continue. Okay, great. Thanks, Gary. Okay, so I'm going to select one of these panels that is a non-rectangular shape. Yep, so I'm going to just select one of these panels that are non-rectangular. It doesn't matter which one it is. So for example, I'm going to choose this sideways heart shape. And up here in the info box, it will show me the settings for just this panel. So if I go to the member type, then remember how when I said before, there's the icons with the rectangular means that it will only fit into a rectangular. Okay, except for this built-in panel, because that will fit anything. But generally, if I try to choose, for example, a door, then you can see that it will actually just choose the bounding shape of this, because a door can't really fit into this kind of strange polygon shape. So therefore, I need to choose one of these icons that shows a hexagonal. So for example, I'm going to scroll down to say use the CW Polygon Window, and then double click that. And now this window is actually fitting to this kind of strange. Okay, it's a little bit strange. I'm not sure why I'd want a window in this shape, but it's possible. Yeah, so we just chose one of these panels and we're just changing the member types between a rectangular one to show how it fits versus a hexagonal icon shape. So I find the louver one, this is quite new. I think this was introduced in 23, this louver panel. I think that's quite useful as well. Yeah. So for now, I've just chosen the Polygon window. So now I can see that the panel class is now a custom panel. So I can actually create a new panel class from this type and then use it in my settings. But for now, we'll just keep it as a custom. Please repeat the insert frame. Okay, that's going back 20 minutes, I think. So to insert frames, we chose the frame tool and we've just clicked on an open end. So when you get the check mark, and then I'm hovering over to see when my pencil either turns solid or with a line in the middle, and then click. So this is how we can get a frame. Will this window be part of the Windows schedule? Yes. So technically it's not using the window tool, it's using the panel tool. Therefore, what we would have to do is with this window, we would have to open up the properties, and under the classification of properties, we would actually have to, instead of saying it's a curtain wall panel, we would have to classify this as a window. So if I classify it as a window, then in the schedules, I can actually say anything classified as a window, please schedule. Yeah. So with it, we'll go through the schedules, I think, in a week's time. No, week and a bit. The timing may be different, but I think this is one of the last sessions. We'll talk about schedules, and I think Ashraf will also be helping with this one. Yeah, so it's based on the classification, and then the schedule would have to schedule based on the classification, not the element type. Please show how to do opening. So all I did was select a panel. So select a panel. Repeat which parts, changing the classification or creating the window. Do window, classification and window. Okay, so I selected one panel. In the member type, I've just chosen the CW Polygon window at the bottom of the list. So I just double click that and it will apply the Polygon window to this panel. And I'm only looking at the panel settings, and under the classification, I've just changed the classification to window. So by default, it chooses curtain wall panel, but I would modify, if you've changed it to a window, I would then change the classification also to window. So in the pop-up here, all I did was search for window and just I'll choose. So when you're modeling anything, I would always check the classification of that element, because sometimes you might want to, for example, especially with the morph, you wouldn't want all morphs just to be classified as the same thing, because some would be classified maybe as massing or furniture or something like this. So always check the classification. How to get the window pop-up. Could be the two. So if I select a panel in the member type in the info box, then here this is how I choose which type. So I'm just choosing the window type. So once it's a window, I just open, with it still selected, I open Control T to open up the settings dialog. And then we just went to the classification and changed the window. So you can see that the opening chooses this edge for the opening. Within the settings, you can actually choose which edge you want to be the opening side. You can't open the window in 3D. I can set it here, what the opening is. I think if I choose this node, then yeah, so it can only go in one direction. So it's not a two-way opening. So here I can open the window. So it's a very strange window, but yeah, opening direction, so it's inside. If I change to outside, now it's the other way. It's likely to only open in one direction. So for example, mine didn't open this way, it only opened the other way. So I had to change the opening side to outside rather than inside. So let's try opening without the node. So we're going to open Control-T on this window. And under the Curtainwall window settings, the window settings and opening, then choose the opening angle. So here, so 3D opening angle. So put in a value like 30 degrees and choose whether it's an inside or opening. So which side so opening direction being outside or inside. Okay. Here we can also say, whether it's side hung, it's a fixed bottom hung. If it's a very strange shape like mine and you want to choose one particular edge, then you'd have to go to custom side and then choose basically a number of which, so maybe it's like the 4th or 5th side. So this is how we can determine which, where it's actually opening from. Okay. Okay, great. Just to understand kind of the underlying grid of this, we're going to go, so we're just going to leave the dialog and just have a look at this, the settings. So the settings up here, this menu, and we're just going to turn on the scheme grid, and we're going to turn off the frames and the panels. Yeah. So it's just turned on the scheme grid, and we've turned off the frames and panels. So it looks like this. Okay. If I click on one of these grid lines, I can actually select that grid line and I can move that grid line. So any frames that are connected to that grid line will move. But because we've made some heavy modifications with custom frames, then it may kind of break it, because if I try to move this, then it will try to move all the frames associated to this grid line, but it will try to keep my custom before. So I'm not going to move this grid line because I have too much custom and it'll kind of break it probably. But we can select those grid lines, and we can drag and modify them. We can actually input other grid lines, but for now we won't deal with that. What I want to work with is this blue line around the edge. So we see this blue line around the edge. If I click on that blue line, then now I'm selecting the boundary. Yep, so I get the little nodes at the ends, and then I'm going to click again on the boundary, and I can see some editing options for the boundary. So all the curtain walls have been just rectangular, but I can actually start modifying this boundary to any polygon shape. So for example, let's choose instead of the curve, because if I curve, this will be the same as what we did before. It creates segments. So we won't use curve for now. We'll just use insert node. And as I move my cursor, I'll actually see the grid lines coming in place. So I'm just going to add a couple of points. So it's similar editing to any polygon shape. So I can chamfer, I can offset all edges. If I click on an edge, I can offset that edge. So very similar to the other editing options we've done earlier this week. And say if I choose one of the end nodes, I can then just drag this out so I can create any polygon shape. When you start editing this, it will start filling it in with your scheme that we've set up before. Anything custom, it will try to keep as much as it can. Okay. So now that I've changed the scheme grid, it can be a little bit slow because it's got to keep creating and updating all of the frames in the background. So try to be a little bit patient when clicking, because it has to do quite a lot of work to work out all of the frames and panels behind it. So even though they're off, they're still being generated in the background. Okay. So now if I turn on the frames and panels, now I can see my boundary has a different shape. Okay. And I can see that my whole frame got moved. So this got moved because my reference line is now over here, because it's the boundary of my curtain wall. So you can see that some things do get changed. Okay, so how could you go with some boundary editing? Could anyone get some boundary editing on this blue line? I tend to find you can actually keep the frame and panels on when you're changing the boundary, but sometimes I find it a little bit easier to maybe turn those off. But obviously, if they're off, then you're not really seeing what's happening in the background. How to draw on the curtain win. So far, I'm not drawing, I'm only editing. Which to edit, which icon? Okay, so when we're editing the scheme grid, we're just clicking on the blue line and we're using either the move node, so exactly the same as what we've done before with editing other polygon elements. And if you click on an edge, this blue edge, then you can insert node and offset, for example. So we just did a couple of insert new nodes from the pet palette. Still having problems for window. Could you get a window? So what is the problem that you're currently having with the window? Could you get a window and make sure that it's the polygon window? I can't select the section. We are not working in section, we're just working in 3D window. So you can't select the window. So usually if you can't click on something, it's usually because this magnet is off. So just make sure that everyone has this magnet on to allow you to select, to click on surfaces. So if this is off, then you can only click on edges and nodes. Okay, so what we're going to do now is exit this edit mode. So either we can just hit escape or we can click on this exit edit mode. So we've finished working with this one. Why my window not merge? It splits by frame. Now using 22 is okay because these features I think came in 22. If there's a frame, then you'll just need to delete that frame. So the panel only merges if the frame doesn't exist. So we just select the frame and then hit delete. Okay, so we're just making sure that we're exiting the edit mode. So we're back into the kind of normal working mode. And this time we're going to go, instead of from 3D, we're going to go to the south elevation. So we'll just click on the south elevation. If you don't have this tab open, just go to your project map. So go to your project map and double click the south elevation. So we can actually edit directly in the section mode, section window. So it doesn't have to be just 3D. We can edit in any view. But now we're going to just draw in the section view, which may be easier for a lot of you because you'll see the facade or an area that you want to fill. So we will draw directly on the elevation. So we're just going to the south elevation tab or double click the south elevation in the project map. Okay. Then we're going to get the curtain wall again. And instead of using the chain, this first method, we're going to choose the boundary method for input. So I'll just zoom into this. So the boundary. Yep. So we're in the south elevation, curtain wall, and boundary method. And I'm going to click along the ground level. And I'm just going to use the sort of XY to draw kind of an L-shaped curtain wall. And to finish the polygon, I just need to click on the first point again till I see this hammer. And then that will complete the boundary. And now I've drawn a curtain wall directly in the into the elevation. So I'm going to do that again. So curtain wall, boundary, and I'm just going to draw a polygon. It can be any shape. It doesn't have to be exactly rectangular. I'm just drawing a polygon, and I'm just making sure I close it with the hammer. My south elevation showed different panel. As long as you're in the south elevation, so mine is showing colored because my default south elevation is showing colored view. So as long as it's showing a curtain wall, it doesn't matter if it's not colored like mine. It's just a matter of settings. So as long as you can see a curtain wall as you draw it in elevation. Okay, could everyone draw a curtain wall in elevation? So anyone having trouble with this? Can, great. Okay, great, thanks. Okay, and we could also edit directly. So we also have this edit button, but for now it's basically the same as 3D, just in an elevation. I've done the shape after that. Just make sure that your last click is on the first click point. So you'll see the little hammer icon to finish it. And then we're just going to have a look at this in 3D by selecting it and hitting F5. Yeah, so now that's my curtain wall. So I find, depending on what you need, sometimes doing it in an elevation may be easier than doing it in another view. So with this boundary method, we can actually do this on the floor plan as well. So the first one, the polyline, these first two kind of behave like a wall. So we just draw a line and it's built from that, but the boundary one, we can just draw any polygon shape and the curtain wall fills into that shape. Okay. So now we're going to try to create our own custom panel. I can't customize the shape. You have to just choose the boundary method, because the boundary method allows you to draw any shape. Do you mean customize the editing, or do you mean the input of this boundary? Editing. Okay, so let's have a look at this curtain wall. So when I'm in edit mode, I need to turn on the scheme grid. And then because I can see the grid, I can see the boundary as well. And I can click on the boundary. It's often easier to turn off the frames and panels, just so you don't have more to click on. Just make sure you choose the boundary. So you can only choose the boundary once the scheme grid is on. So like in 3D, I can just click on this boundary, use the move node or insert node, and I can edit. Yeah, similar to any other polygon. Oh, that was quite loud. The thunder. Okay, so just make sure when you're editing that you see the scheme grid. Yeah, so let me know how you go. Because now we'll go and try to create our own custom panel. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to go into the floor plan window. So we're going to switch to the floor plan. And now we're going to create our own custom panel. And we're going to use the morph to create this. So hopefully everyone still remembers how to create a morph. Yep, so we've exited the editing mode and we've gone to the floor plan now. And just make sure we don't have anything selected. So we're going to choose the morph tool now to create our custom panel. So we're going to try to remember how to do all the editing. So we choose the morph tool and we're going to choose the box method. And on the floor plan, we're going to just click to make a diagonal box, and we're going to choose a morph that is 1500 by 2 meters. And I'm going to hit enter, and now it tells me how tall I want to make it, and I want to make it 300, and okay. So I'm going to do that again. So the morph tool, box method, just one click anywhere, move my cursor away, and the dimension for dimension 1, I'm going to enter 1500. down, use the down arrow, and then 2, 1, 2, 3 zeros, and then enter. And then it asks me what's the height, and I'm going to choose 300. So let me know once you've got a box. I'm just going to put some dimensions on it just for just so you can see it on, so you don't have to, just for your sake. So we're going to make just a rectangle box that is 1.5 meters by 2 meters and 300 tall. So let me know once you've got a box, a morph box. Yep. So hopefully everyone remembers it from the other day. Got it? Okay, great. So I'm going to select this this morph that is 1.5 by 2 meters. So I'm going to select it. So arrow tool, click on this morph, and then I'm going to have a look in 3D. So press F5 and then zoom. So this is my morph box. And we're going to start editing this again, like what we did before. So in 3D, we're going to select this morph. And we're going to create a diagonal line to split this into 2 triangles. So arrow tool, select the morph. I'm going to click on one node or one corner. And from the pet palette, I'm going to choose the pencil. So I'm going to choose the pencil icon. So with the pencil, I'm going to make sure my geometry method, I don't want to draw a box, I want to draw just a line. So I'm going to switch to the polyline. And I'm just going to draw a line diagonally across to the other node and click. So this will divide this into 2 pieces. Yep. So I'm going to undo that and do it again. So click on one node, and then from the pet palette, choose the pencil. Choose polyline because I don't want to draw a box, I want to draw a polyline, and just draw up one line across to the other end when my pencil turns to a solid pencil, then click. And then I can just draw one line from one corner to the other corner. So let me know if you've, once you've got this split, this diagonal. So I'm hoping everyone remembers it. Got it? Great. And now we're going to change the 2 surface colors of these 2 triangles. So who can tell me what the shortcut is to select just one surface? Hopefully someone remembers. So see who can get it first. So who remembers what the shortcut is to select just one of these surfaces? Yeah, good work. Yep, so Control Shift, and I'm going to select one surface. And then I'm going to open up the properties, so Control T, and I'm going to override the surface with, for example, like yellow. Yep. So I've selected one surface, one triangle, hit the override surface, so hit the little paintbrush and changed it to a bright yellow. You can choose 2 contrasting colors, so you don't have to choose the same, but try to choose 2 contrasting colors. I'm choosing yellow for one. I'm hitting OK. So now one triangle is yellow. And I'm going to use Control Shift to select the other triangle, open properties, overriding this and choosing a different color. So all I've done is choose 2 contrasting colors for those 2 triangles. So once you have 2 colors, just let me know. Can't split into 2. I'm going to draw another box just to show you how to do that again. Okay. So to split, we need to click on one node, use the pencil from the pet palette, and then make sure that our geometry method is a line, because we don't want to draw a box on it, we want to draw a line on it. I'm just drawing one diagonal line to the other node, and that will split. Done. Curious which colors that you've chosen. So I've chosen yellow and kind of the greenish color. So which colors have you guys chosen? My pencil toolbox is floating, just because you're inside the editing. So one person asked, my pencil toolbox is floating. So again, I'll show you. Putting a box. Yeah. Yeah. So the Morph toolbox has a two layers. So if you see this layer, then it means that I'm in editing or drawing mode. So if I choose the pencil line with the pencil, then this goes back to my original pet palette to go back to the sort of the main one. So we have the pencil, and then this brings me into the pencil sort of editing input pet palette. So if you need to go back, just click the little pencil with the line through it to switch between these two. So I'm guessing this is what you mean, Casey. Okay, so everyone's got two contrasting colors. No one has told me what colors they've chosen, but I'm sure it's good. The same. Okay, sure. So now what we're going to do is select this morph, so the whole element. So we're not just choosing the arrow tool and clicking on it to choose the whole thing. And we're going to just edit this edge to bring it down. So what I'm going to do is click on the end node, and from the pet palette, I'm going to use the move node, and I'm going to drag this top point down to the bottom point. And I'm going to do the same on the other corner. So therefore, this one side is going to be 0 thickness, and then it's basically going to create a wedge shape. So then click on the corner, use the move node. So this first one. And I'm just going to drag the top point down to the bottom point. So when my cursor turns to a solid pencil, click, so that will move that top node onto the bottom point. So now I've got a wedge shape block. So yep, I'll do that again. So I'm clicking on a top point. So when I get the check mark, using the move node command from the pet palette, so the top left, dragging that down onto the bottom point, and doing that for both corners. So it's dragging the top point down to the bottom point. And now it's a wedge. Okay. So once we've got a wedge that is 1.5 meters by 2 meters, we're going to save this. So if you have, actually, I think some of you only have a demo mode, which means that you can't save. I think for you guys, this won't work, but for those using the trial version or educational version, then this will work. So because we need to save this, then for those with the demo version, you won't be able to do this. Okay. So for everyone else, what we're going to do is File, Libraries and Objects. So select this Morph element, File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, and I'm going to keep this menu up for a little bit, and we're going to save it as a curtain wall panel. So I'm going to keep this up for a few seconds. We select the morph and then follow this path that's on the screen. For those with, again, for those with a demo version, this probably will be grayed out or not available. Yeah, so File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, Curtain Wall Panel. So I'm clicking on this, and then I get the dialog. So I could save this from the floor plan, then I wouldn't get this dialog, but because I'm selecting from the 3D, then I get it. And we're just going to make sure that we choose the horizontal plane in this dialog, and choosing continue and save. So hopefully some of you can get this save curtain wall panel dialog. So let me know if some of you can get to this point. I think some of you won't be able to because you're on a demo version. So I think those on demo probably just need to watch, but okay. So in the name, I'm just going to call this triangle panel. Yeah, choose horizontal plane. And then this will bring up the panel saving. So I'm saving it into my embedded library. So this means that it will only be used for this this model, this project. If I wanted to save this out, then I should save it into either a different library or save it and then extract it into a better location. Where to save again? We're still in the dialog. So we're just in the embedded library because that's all we have. And we've just called it triangle panel. Yep, so triangle panel. So this is all we've done. So save, we're in the embedded library and we're saving this as triangle panel. Oh, you mean, okay, because I had that menu open for like a minute or something. So I thought the File, Libraries and Objects, Save Selection As, Curtain Wall Panel. So let me type that. File, Libraries. There we go. Okay, I think some of you are already up to this point. So we called the triangle panel and we're hitting save. We just get information to say it's saved and we're just going to click OK. Did everyone have this? So just let me know who doesn't have this save function available. So you're just going to make sure that you select the object before you save it, because otherwise it's not saving anything. So just let me know if anybody couldn't save because you're on demo. Okay, let me know if you successfully saved this object then. And then I can move on. Done. Great. Thanks, Gary. Okay. Save, but not sure if correct. As long as the wedge looks basically like mine, then it should be okay. And we use the horizontal plane. In GSM, this will be in the background, but you won't see this. So I gave the path above. So we just needed to save it as a curtain wall panel, because that will mean that within the curtain wall, I can use this object. Okay, done. Okay, so now that we've got that, we're going to go into the curtain wall tool and just into the default, and we're going to modify some settings and start using the saved curtain wall panel. So in the curtain wall system, so we've made this 2 meters tall. So we're going to change the height of this curtain wall to say 6 meters. So it's easily divisible by the 2 meters. So the curtain wall we're in the system, we're going to make it 6 meters tall. We can edit this later, so it's not a huge problem if you don't set this. And we're going to then switch to scheme. And we're going to modify the scheme. So we've only got 4 panels. So a simpler setup here. So to get us started, what we can do is just modify these, but it may be easier to get us started. So under scheme, I'm going to go to the favorites, and I'm going to choose checkerboard. So I'm going to double click that, and that will give us a better start to what we need. So under scheme, I've chosen the favorites, and I've just double clicked the checkerboard option. Okay, so let me know if you've got the checkerboard now visible. Great. Okay, so for this one, we actually don't need any of these frames. So what we're going to do is either click on all of them to select. Mine looks dashed. Then maybe you chose a different scheme. So just make sure the scheme, you choose the checkerboard option, which is the first one. Yeah. So we've got columns, fixed size, and rows of fixed size. Mine too dashed. Yes, it is. Just look dashed. Strange, because we've gone on scheme and we've chosen checkerboard. So the checkerboard should look like this. So I'm not sure what you mean by dashed. Okay, so as long as we have 2 columns and 2 rows. So we've got A and B, and we've got 1 and 2. Yeah, so my side frames here are also dashed. That's okay. No sound. I think others can hear. Okay. So the A and B columns. Okay, so we were going to change, but we'll change the sizes first. So the A and B. So the columns, the width we need to be 1500. So it's going to match the size of the custom frame that we made. I'm going to make this 1500. A and B is also 1500. And the row heights, we're going to make 2 meters and 2 meters. So therefore, it's going to match the custom frame that we made before. So 1500, 1500. And and the rows are going to be 2 meters by 2 meters and both 2 meters. So the exact same size that we made our morph object. And we want to get rid of all of these frames in the center. So we want to actually create all those as just divisions. What I'm going to do is select a frame. So I'm going to select one frame, and then I'm going to say all row, all across. And I'm going to change them to divisions because I actually don't want any frames. I just want lines between the panels. And my horizontal ones, I'm going to choose all above, all across, and change these also to division. So you can just select them individually by holding Shift. Yeah, and then making sure they're all set to division. So we should just see 4 panels of alternating colors. So I'll give you just a few seconds to do that. So we've just clicked on the frames and set them all to division. And to make it a little bit easier, you can just use the selection, the row and column kind of selection buttons. Okay, so once you've set all of these frames to division, just let me know. Done, great. Yeah, so we've got 2 glass panels. This is because we renamed them earlier. So as long as you've got alternating colors in the preview, then this is great. And that all of the frames are now being set to division. Yeah, so some are done, great. Yeah, so alternating patterns and all the frames to division. Okay, so we're going to model this first, repeat. I just did. So everyone's preview should look something like this. So we've set the rows to 2 meters and the columns to 1.5. And we've set the frames to division and the panels and are alternating. So it's quite a lot of work that we just did. So I'll just give a few more seconds. Okay, so once we've got this in place, we're going to hit OK on this dialog, and we're going to draw a new curtain wall. So we're going to do 1 click, and I can see that I'm on boundaries, so I actually need to switch to the linear single segment method, so the polyline single. And I'm just going to draw a single wall, single curtain wall. I might need to change the settings later. And I'm going to make this 7, so I'm going to type in 7500, so 7.5 meters, because it's then divisible by 1.5. So I'm entering 7.5 or 7500 and enter. Okay, so for me, I see some problems, but I can edit this after. Okay, so we've gone curtain wall. We've made sure that we're inputting just with the single line. We've made 1 click, and along the x-axis, we've just typed in 7500 and enter for a curtain wall. This is exactly 7.5 meters long. and mine is 6 meters high because this is what I set in the default. So our curtain wall is 7.5 meters long and it's 6 meters tall. I just had to switch from the boundary method to just the single wall to draw just 2 clicks to get our curtain wall. So let me know how you go. So I see mine has a few errors, so I just need to modify this. Done. Great. Thanks, Gary. Okay. So I'm going to select this curtain wall. Done. Great. So I'm going to select my curtain wall and go Control T, open up the properties. Okay. So one error that I could see was the pattern geometry is actually starting from the center. So under the pattern geometry of this selected curtain wall, I'm going to now change to start with pattern rather than the from the center. So I'm going to just make sure that this is set to start from the center, start from the left, and then start from the bottom, the pattern. Yeah, so I'm just making sure the pattern is starting from the end. The two hours is almost up, but if everyone can stick around maybe for at least another half an hour or 40 minutes or so, hopefully, and I can continue if that's okay. Gary's okay? Okay, thanks. Okay, so just make sure that we set the pattern origin to start from the left, and that we've got the offsets to at 0 and 0. Then I'm going to click OK. And for me, I actually don't want the boundary. So the boundary is a little bit disturbing. So I just want the panels. But now the origin of this is better. So it now starts from the corner. That's good. So to get rid of the boundary, we're going to open up the settings again. And we don't have just an on-off of the boundary. But what we can do is set the frames. So I'm moving to the frames, going to the boundary type, and I'm going to choose, instead of a frame, I'm going to choose invisible. Okay. So with the centered box, we change the scheme to make sure the pattern origin is starting from start with pattern. So we just made sure that we set these pattern origin settings. And now we're setting the frame. The boundary frame should be set to invisible. And I don't want a thickness, so I'm going to choose 0 for the thickness. So it may be invisible, but you can have a gap, but I don't want any gap. So I just want to set this at 0. So we've set the boundary frame to invisible and set to 0. And now I'm going to hit OK. And now I don't have a boundary. I can't draw the frame after setting. We're not drawing any frames. We're just setting the boundary frame to 0 and to invisible. So a main window. We're not putting any window in. We're just having this hexagonal, this checkerboard pattern, the curtain wall. Okay, so I can't draw the frame after setting. I meant window, the curtain wall. Still don't understand what you mean. So all we've done is open up the settings of this curtain wall, and we've gone to frames, and we've set boundary frame to invisible, and set this to 0. Yeah, just to make sure that the boundary is off. So currently we haven't used our panel, but now that we've got these panels at exactly 1.5 by 2 meters, we're now going to replace one of these panels with this custom one we made. Yeah. So we'll back in the settings dialog for this curtain wall, and we're going to go to panels, the panels on the left, and we're going to change the aluminium panel. So one of these types. Yours may not be called aluminium, but let's modify the name. So I'm just clicking again at the name, and I'm going to call this triangle panel. So I've just renamed one of them to triangle panel because we're going to use this one to apply our custom one. So to rename, I just click. So I just click again on the name and then type in triangle panel. And keep the other one glass or whatever it was currently. So we just renamed one to triangle panel. So once we've got this renamed to triangle panel, just so we know exactly what which one we're working with, we're going to go and change the setting. So for the instead of built-in, we're going to choose the CW custom panel. So we're going to rename to triangle panel, and we're going to choose the type to the custom panel. So just double click this, and now we've set this to a custom one. If I have a look, the panel name, because there's only one saved, it automatically chose my triangle panel custom panel frame. Panel. So if I see this in 3D, I can now see this custom one that I made before. I can see that the thickness is using a default. So I'd made mine 300 before, so I'm going to change the panel thickness to 300. Yeah, so now the preview shows the correct size. Yeah, so we've just changed the panel thickness to 300, and the panel name from the pop-up, we've chosen the triangle panel, which is the only one stored in this project. So now we've changed that class to use this custom panel that we've made. So once we've set the panel thickness to 300 and we've changed this to the custom panel, does it matter the thicker is on this? No, it doesn't. So it doesn't matter if it's at the top and bottom. So once we've changed the thickness, overall thickness to 300, and we're going to choose OK. Yeah, so now I can see all of my alternate panel is this one that we'd saved before. You can. I was actually going to do that in the next step. This upside down. So for now, we'll just place these alternate ones with our custom panel. And I can see that it aligns with the front and moves kind of backwards. So it doesn't align kind of to the center or from the back. We can modify this because the panels have a setting that we can offset. Okay, so let me know if you can see your alternating colors. Yes, great. So I'm going to open up the settings again. Yeah. So this panel offsets, we can modify this, but for now we'll just keep it at 0 because now we're going to modify the glass panels as well. Okay. So remember how instead of having to, so I actually want the glass panels to use the same panel type, but just with some modifications. So to copy the settings, we're going to go right click and go copy. So from the triangle panel, we're going to copy that, go to the glass one, right click and paste. So now we've got the exact same panel type. And I'm going to rename yeah, for now I won't rename because we're going to make some changes first. So I just went from my triangle panel, right click, copy, into the glass one, right click, paste. So now they're the exact same type. But for one of them, I actually want to change the top direction to 180. So basically I want to flip it. So one is set to 180 and the other one is set to 0. So one of them is set to 180 and the other one is set to 0. So all we did was copy and paste the settings and change one of them to 180. And now when I click OK, now I can see they are alternating. So we create quite an interesting facade. So when you create these custom panels, so if we'd made, because it's 1.5 by 2 meters, then this panel always fits and stretches to the size of your panel curtain wall. So if these columns were, say, 3 meters wide, then this panel will stretch to fit that panel size. So this is why we tried to keep the panel sizes exactly the same as the object we saved. Can flip or mirror the pattern. How do you mean? So currently it's alternating. Do you mean like flip like in SketchUp? I don't know what that means. So if you want it rotated, we could rotate, or we could create another object where one side, what the long side is 0, so the wedge is going the other direction. Or the top direction, we could choose, say, 90 or 270 rather than 0 and 180. In this case, our panels have been set up to be tall. So if we flip the top direction to 90 or 270, then it's going to stretch kind of the other way. But this is also okay. So let's try that. So we can go 90 for one of them, and the other one I'm going to choose 270, and I'm going to hit OK. So now it's flipped the direction, but also stretched the stretched. So is this what you mean by flip, or? So all I did was change, yeah, from the 180. So I'm going to change mine back to 180 and 0, and hit OK. So now it's vertical. Yeah. The flip, so in the settings there is a flip panel, so this would reverse the direction, but I would tend to just flip the direction of the curtain wall. So if you want the outside inside to be the opposite direction. So like what we said before, this is similar to the wall, where we can flip which side is the outside and which side is the inside. So this orientation, we've got to flip, so we can change the direction. Yep. Okay, we're going to do one more example where we actually create a pattern. This will take a little bit of work because we need to design a pattern, but let's try that. So maybe it will take 20 minutes or so to do that. Please show how to modify, sorry, just a question. Please show how to modify panel, change color, and save. So because this is a saved object, we can't change the color of this inside the curtain wall itself. So if we want to change the colors, we would need to save a new object. I believe. So I think if I go to the, yeah, I can override just with one material, but if I want to modify the original, I would need to, so this one, I would need to modify the colors and then save this again as a new panel type, or save over the existing panel type. So it's probably worth keeping this original kind of morph object just on a hidden layer. So you can kind of modify it and make copies or something of it later if you want a new version or to modify this. But then you would just save over it, and this would then update. Okay, so now we'll try one more kind of example, one more workflow. What we're going to do is go to the floor plan again. Yep. So we're going to go to the floor plan. And we're just going to go into some empty kind of space, just away from all the curtain walls that we've worked with before. And we're going to get the Curtainwall tool. And I'm just going to double click to open up its default setting. Yep. So I've gone to floor plan, double click the Curtainwall, and we've got the default settings. And then we'll go to the system. So we'll select the system, and we're going to change everything back kind of to its default settings. So to do that, we're going to, win the Curtainwall system, we're going to click on the favorites, and we're just going to go double click on the generic Curtainwall. So double click that, and that will apply all of the settings and all of the subcomponents to that favorite. Yeah, just to kind of reset it back. Click on, just opened up the settings, clicked on the favorites, but make sure that you're on the Curtainwall system first, because if we're on another one, then we've got sub favorites. So make sure that we're on the system, favorites, and double click the generic Curtainwall. Yeah, so double click generic Curtainwall to get it back all the default settings, and we're going to hit OK. And again, we're just going to draw a new Curtainwall just with a single method, and I'm just going to do one click and along the x-axis around sort of 8 meters or something, 8-9 meters, and we're just going to click. So we've got a Curtainwall about sort of 9 meters or something in length. Okay, so to work with this in section, I'm going to actually draw a new section just in front of it, just to see this section, just so I don't see everything else. So I'm going to create a new section. So once I've drawn a Curtainwall, just 2 clicks, about 8-9 meters long, then choose the section tool. And I'm going to choose the limited depth. So under the horizontal range, I'm going to choose limited depth, because I only want to see the depth basically of this Curtainwall. So I don't want to see infinite, because there may be other stuff behind it, which will just get in the way of our next exercise. So choosing section and chose limited depth. So I'm going to draw a Curtainwall line in front of it, again along the x-axis. So click so it's longer than the Curtainwall, and then I'm going to click behind the Curtainwall, because I want to include this into the limited depth. For some reason, I can't see. Okay, my settings are somehow not doing what I wanted to do. So as long as we have even if you don't do it before, we can still change it after. So we've just drawn a section line in front of the curtain wall. So we include the entire curtain wall and limited depth, just so we can see this enclosed. So let me know if you've got a section line in front of this curtain wall, because then we're going to use this section to sort of edit and draw on this curtain wall. Done. Great. Thanks, Gary. Okay, so once we've drawn this section line, so we're going to right click on it and use the open with current view settings. How to get the box. I presume this box. So just make sure the section line is using a limited depth for horizontal range. So this one. So we don't want to see infinitely, we just want to see up until kind of behind the curtain wall. Okay. So once we've got this section line, I'm going to right click and open with current view settings. So now I can see my curtain wall in elevation or in section. So I'm going to select with the arrow tool, I'm going to select this curtain wall. And for this one, I'm actually going to clear this pattern out. So I just kind of want an empty one because we're actually going to draw our own little pattern and have that repeat. So we've selected the curtain wall and we're going to open up settings. So Control T. And we're going to go to scheme and we're going to clear this pattern out. So just to have an empty area. So what we're going to do is click on this little X in the pattern, which will clear it. So clear pattern. So if I click that, it's now going to just have an empty area. And then I'm going to hit OK. So this will clear the pattern out. So just let me know if you can clear the pattern. So select the curtain wall, open the settings, scheme, and hit the little X to clear the pattern. So within the editing window, so clear it and hit OK. Done. Okay, so the next bit we're going to draw with some lines, a little bit of a pattern, and then we're going to trace that with the frame tool. But first we're going to draw some lines so it's easier for us to trace over. So I find drawing some lines is actually easier that we can trace afterwards. So this might take a little bit of effort. So what we're going to do is choose the line tool and make sure that we've just got a single line. And first, so we have to draw this fully inside the frame. So inside this boundary. I'm going to just draw a vertical line along the y-axis. And I'm going to say this is 800. So the distance is 800 and enter. So I've just got one line that's 800. Actually, maybe this is a little bit. Yeah, maybe it's okay. So I've just drawn one line that's 800. So somewhere kind of in the top left-hand corner, just leave enough space around it so it doesn't go outside of the boundary. So it should be fully inside the curtain wall boundary. And now we're going to mirror, rotate a copy of this line. So I'm going to rotate a copy. So does anyone remember how to make a copy? So rotate is Control E to rotate. And if I tap the Control key again, I should get a little plus. So I'll type this in to the Control plus E plus Control E and then Control. Nope, don't need to use Shift because we want to use a copy. We could also do, no, we don't need the Shift. So Control E plus tapping the Control key, or we could use Mirror. So I'm going to use the Rotate. So with the line selected, I'm going to use Control E, tap the Control key. On Mac, actually, it's a different key. And then find its center point. So when we get the tick in the center, if you don't see it in the center, just make sure that you've got your snap guide on half. Yep. So just make sure that we have on half. And when I see the tick in the middle, I'm going to click and I'm going to rotate from one axis around to the other axis to make a copy. Mirror will work as well. I just find maybe rotate is a little bit easier. Because mirror, you would have to find a sort of diagonal instead. So Control E, tap Control to make the little plus appear on my cursor. Choose the center point, and then choose axis, sort of one axis, and then rotate it around to the other axis. So now I've got two lines. They're intersecting. Probably if you've only got one, probably because you didn't tap the Control key. Then your cursor will show a little plus to indicate it will make a copy. So as above, I wrote the command. So I'm going to do that again. So select the line, Control E, tap the Control key to make a little plus. Find the center point, click. Now I want to go from my Y-axis, click, and across to my X-axis, and then click. So we've rotated a copy from the center point. So if you just rotate it, then it will just rotate. But if you see a little plus in the cursor, then this will make a copy. Yeah, you can hold Shift, or you can kind of snap to the XY lines, the XY axis. Okay, so could you get a so nope, you don't need to use the Shift. So the Shift is not in the rotate. You don't need to use Shift. So if we go Shift Control E, then that does nothing. So we just need, yeah, because otherwise, if I'm holding Shift, it will just make a noise. So we don't need Shift. So Control E and then tap the Control key to make a copy of it. Okay, so once we've got two lines, we're now going to make a diamond shape around the center points of these. Noisy Mac. I guess Windows also makes a beeping noise if you make an error. Okay, So to get the center point, so again, if I hover over, I see the center point, but that's already taken. So I want to center point from to the intersection here. So we're going to go up to turn that on again. Okay, so we're going to go from our snap points, and we're going to make a modification. So we've got it on half already, but I want to scroll down and I want to go, instead of between nodes, I want to change to between intersection points. So I want to select this option. Yeah, so now it's between intersection points. Yeah. So from here, from this little drop down, we're on half, and now we're on between intersection points rather than between nodes. So now when I hover over, it's going to show me a little dash between this intersection here. So now that I've got a dash, I'm going to dash and I'm going to make 45 lines between each of these intersection points. So to make a diamond shape. So we just need 4 lines. So let me know if you have the 4 lines of these diagonals. Done. Great. Okay. So once we've got these 4 diagonal lines, creating kind of this rotated rectangle or rotated square, I now want to trim off these lines in the center, just so they're a little bit distracting, because I want this to be an open area inside. So with nothing selected, I'm just going to hold Control, and my cursor turns to a scissors, and I'm just going to click these lines in the center just to trim them off. So just holding Control, I'm just clicking on those lines to trim them. Okay. So we all should have basically a rotated square with lines coming out from the edge. So now we're going to use this to trace our pattern. Okay, so let me know how you go with this. So now that we've got our kind of guidelines, we can now draw over with frames. Got it. Okay, thanks. Okay, so we're just going to make sure that all those connections are connected, so they're all clean. So now we're going to select the curtain wall. And we're going to hit the edit button. So we're going to go into edit mode of the curtain wall. Yeah. So select the curtain wall and click edit, because now we're going to go to the frames and we're going to draw over here. Okay, so before we draw, so everyone's in the edit mode, selected the frame tool, and maybe the frame class, I'm not going to choose the boundary frame. I might choose the mullion frame. Which one is better? Yeah, mullion. So from the frame class, I'm going to choose mullion. Can't see, make sure your environment is not off. So make sure your environment is on. So in the little menu here, make sure environment is has a little eye. So if it's off, then it means it's hidden. Yeah. So we've got the frame tool. We've changed the frame class to mullion. and the environment is on. And now we're going to draw over these lines. So when we see a tick, it's on an end node. So I'm going to click on a node. And when I see the black pencil, then I click again. So when we will see some pink lines, but we can ignore them for now. So I'm just going to draw over each of these lines, making sure that we connect to the nodes. So we just have to do one by one. And we're connecting the points. Okay. So now I've got my frames and I've drawn over each of those lines. Okay, so we're just going to make sure that we're accurate, and we click on the intersecting nodes, so the end nodes, from one end to another end of those lines. So it all should be cleaned up. So there shouldn't be any kind of lines, kind of unnecessary lines there. So it should be all clean. So let me know once you've drawn over this. Yes. Done. Great. Thanks, Gary. Good. Okay, so now once we've got those lines, those frames all drawn accurately, now we're going to define the pattern. So we're going to move the pattern to be basically the boundary of this. Done. So in our layers on the left here, we're going to turn on pattern. So we see a layer that's called pattern. We're going to turn that on. Okay, so turn pattern on. So now that we've turned the pattern on, we can see around the boundary this kind of red line. So we see two sides that are dashed and two sides that are solid. So this is the definition of the pattern. Yeah. They're dashed and solid because basically one edge will use any elements on that edge and the other edge will ignore. Because we don't want, for example, if there's frames on both sides, we don't want to overlap or repeat. So basically it just repeats one side, but anything inside this pattern will be repeated. So on this red line, we're going to click, and from the pet palette, we're going to use the offset edge. So clicking on the edge of the pattern, and we're going to use offset edge, and we're going to drag that to the end point of the frame. So I'm just dragging that bottom one up to the bottom of this frame and clicking. And already I can start seeing the pattern being defined. So now I'm clicking the top edge, I'm dragging this down, so using the offset edge and clicking the top of the frame here, click. So now you can see already my frame is starting, my pattern is already repeating. So then I click the left edge, so we need to do on this on all four sides and drag that to the end of this frame. And then I have to scroll all the way over and click the edge of this frame, at the edge of this pattern, and I'm going to drag this. And so when I'm dragging, you can see the pattern being repeated. So then I need to move that. So basically, you just need to move those four edges so they're on each edge of the frames here. So once you've aligned these edges to the ends of the frames, we then will hit apply. So we want to lock in that pattern. And now I can see that pattern that I drew being repeated over this entire curtain wall. So once we've got this pattern box on, we're modifying the boundary of this pattern to the ends of the frame. And once we've set it, we're going to hit apply. So once we've hit apply and it kind of looks good, we're just going to exit from edit mode. So once I've exited, I'm just going to select it and then show this in 3D, so F5. So now I can see my pattern repeated. So here we can draw anything. Just when you draw something as a pattern, just try to understand how it's going to repeat. So that's why I've tried to make it symmetrical so it repeats well. So if it doesn't match, then you might have different results. So that's why I find drawing it with some lines is easier. It's vent block. Can't select edge. So make sure the pattern is on, and we've clicked the edge of the pattern, and we've just offset the pattern. Can you change the material and add panels to? I'll show. Yeah, I'll show that soon. Can you save this as a favorite scheme so that it can be reused? Yes, you can. Okay, so I'm just showing this in 3D. Yep, so now I can see my pattern. And now we're going to open up. So we're going to select the curtain wall. So we're not in edit mode anymore. So select the curtain wall, and I'm going to open up my properties. And we're going to choose the scheme from this settings dialog. So here I can actually see my pattern. I can't move these frames directly in here, but this is saved as one kind of scheme, as a custom scheme. But because it's a custom scheme, I can actually click on different components. For example, I can click the inner parts, and I can set this to be, say, the main panel, and click on the outer part and change this to a distinct panel. And I can actually choose the frames and change the frames here, or change the frame type and sizes within the frames. So I've clicked on the outer part, set to distinct, selected the middle part, and set this to main panel. Can you move the pattern to? Yep, I'll show you that also. So I can see from here that maybe it's a little bit small and I want to make it a little bit bigger. So in my columns, I can see that it's 800, but I'm going to increase this a bit to say 1200, and change my row to also 1200. So I've basically scaled this up. I can't add rows and columns, but I can scale this this pattern here. So I've increased it from 800 to 1200 for both. And I've made sure that I've clicked on the panels and changed those from deleted to main and distinct. So once I've set these up, so I've changed the size and also changed the panel types, classes, I'm going to hit OK. So now I can see it's a lot bigger, and now it has panels inside. If I click on the top node of this curtain wall, and from the pet palette choose the second on the top row, I can then stretch the height of this curtain wall. So I can see more of this pattern. Or we could set the height of the curtain wall inside the settings dialog. Okay, so can everyone see panels? And they could edit the overall size of this custom scheme. Yes. Okay. So now I'll show you. So I can see that it positioned it where I drew it. But if I want to move this pattern so it actually aligns with the bottom left. So let's go into the settings dialog again under the scheme and the pattern origin. So here it's starting, but it has an offset. So based on where I draw it. So I can just set these both to 0. So it will align from the bottom left. When stretch up, the diamond doesn't extend up. Gary, in your settings, you see the diamond shape as the scheme. Yes. Then just choose your curtain wall system and then just increase the height in the settings. A, B, C, okay. So we should only have an A and a 1 because we technically can't add more. So Jessica, do you see your diamond shape in here? And you've actually selected the curtain wall, or you've selected maybe the default. So maybe you didn't select this curtain wall before opening up the settings. Yeah. So what I've done is change the pattern origin just to be 0, 0. I can see the diamond. Okay, so you can see the diamond, but you see other rows and columns. Strange. Okay, so I've just set the pattern origin to be 0, 0, and we can change the system, the overall system, the height to maybe like 6 meters. So it's a little bit taller. And then I'm hit OK. So now we'll rearrange the pattern to be aligned with this bottom corner. Yeah. So we can go back into edit mode and adjust those frames and then readjust the pattern to then redefine that pattern. So we can do that afterwards. And if we want to save this diamond shape, we can just go into the favorites and we can then add a new favorite just of this diamond shape. So again, depending on which page or which part we're on, we're either saving, so here, if we save the scheme, it will only save the scheme and not all the other components. So if we want everything to be stored, then we'd go to the system and then save a favorite from the system. And that would save the entire curtain wall with all the frames, panels, etc. Yeah. So like before, we could actually edit the boundary, so we can do all those edits like before. So any questions from this morning's session? So we went a little bit over, quite a bit over. How to save the modal, the whole model, or just as a favorite? So obviously we can just save the ARCHICAD file. If we just want to store this as a favorite, yeah, so in my settings, if you just want the scheme, so just the pattern, then under scheme, we can just hit the favorites icon in the top left and then hit the star with a little plus to save that scheme as a favorite. Or we could go to the system and save the entire curtain wall as a favorite. Yeah. So if we save the entire curtain wall system, then this will save everything. But if we just do the scheme, then this only stores this pattern. And if you want to reuse it on other projects, then you can just go to the favorites dialog and kind of import, export those favorites to use onto other projects. Yeah. Just a couple of notes maybe about the curtain wall, because there's a lot of polygons. So because this is quite complex with him, so you can see here when it's selected, there's quite a lot of polygons within this. So using a very complex curtain wall can slow things down because of the amount of polygons. So I would try to keep it fairly simple. If we go to the model view options, so down here in the status and the quick options bar, so there's model view options. Then there's a few settings that we can actually set. So under Curtainwall options, we can actually set, depending on the saved view, we can actually make this simpler. So for example, if we don't want to see all of these frames, we can actually make the frames just a line. So for example, in a more general elevation or something, you may want to set this to be just lines, or change it to simpler if you're kind of working on a big model, just to simplify the geometry. Can show again how to apply triangle panel on the curtain wall. Sorry, that was a long time ago. Maybe we can watch the recording. So this is being recorded. So what I did was, obviously in detail, go through the images. So what I did was draw this morph, save it as a curtain wall panel object, and then use the object, and then applied that to here. So I saved it as a curtain wall panel, and then applied that panel into the curtain wall. So any further questions? The model view options, yeah, is quite good. So changing the model wall options, so basically changing the level of detail or turning bits and pieces off. So if you're looking at an overall facade more general, then probably you'd want to simplify these. What you did, the bottom icon there, I'm just opening up, so it's just a quick access to the model view options, which is this dialog. So the icon down there is just a shortcut to this dialog. And this can be stored per view. So we can have some views which are more detailed and other views which are less detailed. So I find this quite useful. And usually for working, it's maybe a bit better to use a little bit less detail, just so it's a little bit quicker, because there's less polygons on the screen. Cool. Any further questions on the curtain wall? Like obviously you can just chat to us later if there's anything specific. I find this quite good, obviously, to do, for example, like tiling and stuff. I've used that a couple of times. Metal grill. Yeah. So just be mindful of the amount of polygons. So the curtain wall tends to get quite heavy with the amount of polygons. So if you're doing something more detailed, consider whether you need it geometry based or whether you can get by with just a vectorial hatch and a texture. So something much simpler. So you need to make that call. Because if you add too much geometry, then your file will be much heavier. Okay. So if there's no further questions, this is it for today's session. So I think we'll start again probably next Tuesday, but I think we will reconsider just the timings for the next sessions. But thanks for joining today, and yeah, we'll try to get this recording up. Yeah, there will be a recording at some point. Okay, so thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day, and have good lunch. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.